Hello, hi. My name's Maggie Hensel-Brown. I'm an artist and a lace maker living and working in Naarm or Melbourne, Victoria. And I am so honoured, I am so thrilled, I'm so excited to be part of this Lacing Communities Together project for the Columbia Gorge Museum. Thank you first off to the museum for having me, and even more importantly, thank you, viewer, participant, lacer, stitcher, for joining in and for making something beautiful. I think we're going to create something spectacularly beautiful together. Now, a couple of things about the project, about the way that I've made it. You can see that all of the samplers are in the shape of triangles. They are either 6 inches sides or 3 or 1.5 inches. They're all measured on the piece of paper, so if you can just adjust that in your printer or just, add a couple of marks by pen just to make sure that they're vaguely the right size. There'll be a little bit of give that I can sort of work around in the joining process, but really we want them to basically be that size. One of the things that I've found with lace making is that because there is so much detail in it and because there's so much richness to concentrate in each piece, you kind of need to pare back things where you can outside of that so that you can concentrate on those details. So one of the ways that I'm doing that is by trying to keep the colour palette quite muted. So we're sticking with like a traditional white or an off-white for lace making. It also makes it a lot easier to see. Light colours are a lot easier to work in when you're stitching for the first time because you can really see the shadows in between the stitches. So whites and off-whites, light kind of brown colours, and then any shade of green as well. I think with that kind of cool tone, it's going to make the piece really beautiful, really subtle, and really be able to get us to concentrate on the places where we want the concentration to be, on the stitches and on the marvellous creations that you all have made. We'll get a lovely soft gradient between those colours. It also feels really in keeping with the area. In my experience of being in the Pacific Northwest, these kind of beautiful, soft greys and greens and cool, beautiful colours, that's my memory of being there a lot as a child. First, I've got a piece of fabric. This is just cotton. Anything non-stretch will do. And you want something that you can fold into 4. You can see I've used this a few times. There's quite a lot of little leftover threads there. You want something you can fold into 4 and still have big enough for your whole lace piece. Next, you have your paper pattern. You can just print these out. The PDFs will be attached anywhere you're watching this video. Now just something that's going to protect your paper from ripping. I've got these little squares of contact plastic. So the teal stuff is Lace Maker's Contact. Any lace making specialty stores or websites, you could find this stuff. But also you can just use the stuff that you would use to cover books with. In fact, this is clear contact and it's actually window tinting, just regular window frosting, and I find it works really, really well, sometimes even better than the regular lace making stuff. So anything that is transparent, a little bit matte, something that your needle will slide off of and that will protect your paper. At a pinch, you could even use just packing tape, just something that's going to give that paper a nice bit of protection. Even if it's a little bit shiny, it'll be perfectly fine. So you should have something readily available, accessible to you, either at your local craft store or office supplies or even hardware store for this window tinting. Threads. So I want to encourage everyone doing this project to use threads that they already have or that are just recycled, easily accessible. I got all of these from thrift stores. Anything that you want to use, to try. Remember, keeping within our colour palette. These are all just between, I think this is a size 10. We can use that for big pieces. right up to, I would put this at about a size 60. So you don't want anything that's too fibrous. You don't want anything, the fibers kind of catch onto each other and you want to avoid that. So something quite smooth, something that maintains its integrity when you're pulling it through time after time. I often just use a crochet cotton, tatting cotton is really good. Yeah, just try everything. This is a chance to play and experiment. Open up that drawer of all of those threads that you've got left over from other things and give them all a go. So that was lace thread. Now we want a couching thread. So this is just going to be to hold all of your lace threads in place on the backing. So it doesn't matter what color it is, it's not going to show up in your final piece. The only thing you want is for it to be a very fine cotton and quite breakable. You don't want anything too strong here because eventually we're going to want to tear it a bit, so you don't want anything that you're struggling too much with. And ideally, if you're beginning, you want something that's a little bit of a contrasting color to your finished piece, because that's just going to show up a little bit better and help you with your stitches. And needles. So you're going to need 2, anything that fits your thread. The only thing that I like to specify with your needles is that they don't sort of bulge out at the end. You want something that's nice and smooth all the way to the top for both. So a fine one for your couching thread and a thicker one for your lace thread. So scissors, whatever your finest pair of scissors are. These are super fine embroidery scissors that I adore. Anything that comes to a nice sharp tip. Nail scissors will do in a pinch if you can't find any embroidery ones, just something nice and fine. All right, and now that you've got everything you need, you can start. Now, another thing that I really want to push at the top of this project, and it's something that I say in every class, in every community project, it's not going to be perfect, nor should it be. One of the reasons why I love these community projects is that you can have something that's really low stakes and really small and fun and just a chance to experiment. And by the time we build up all of these beautiful experiments, we're going to get something that's so spectacular. I really want you to use this as just a chance to be quite playful with your stitches. If you're new, let it be messy. If you're really confident already, then try something new. Try some, a new stitch, a new technique. Try working backwards, try working with your eyes closed, try all kinds of things. Anything that gives you a lovely kind of low stakes way of enjoying yourself while you're stitching, because I think one of the things that I'm trying to sort of really preach in my practice and in my lace making is that this is fun, and it's a fun way to experiment and just enjoy using this really pared back way of creating a design. Essentially, we're just using positive and negative space, and that can be such an interesting springboard to work from. There is just the most special place in my heart for a messy, beginner's, beautiful, knotted, gnarled sampler. Let this sort of be a loosening of the way that you work, and let yourself have fun and experiment. So this is lesson 1. In this lesson, what we're going to do is the start. I've divided our first sampler up into 2 halves. What you're going to learn first is what's called laying a coordinate, and then we are going to do some buttonhole stitch. Now, buttonhole stitch is the basis of every other single thing that you're going to do. You're basically, all of the kind of lace making that we're doing in this is a variation of buttonhole stitch. So I've dedicated quite a bit of time in this first lesson to really honing that and to making sure that you're really confident with your buttonhole stitches. So let's just get straight into it. Welcome to lesson 1. So first you're going to take your fabric, fold it into 4. Now lay your paper pattern straight down on top. Now we'll cover the paper with some contact plastic to stop it from ripping. So you'll take the backing off and lay it down directly on top of the paper. Next, you're going to take a length of your couching thread, this fine cotton, and thread it onto your needle. Now we're going to secure the thread to the back of your piece. So just a couple of stitches on top of each other, not all the way through, just through a couple of layers of fabric, 1 or 2, and then a few stitches on top of each other until that thread feels nice and secure. Now bring the needle through the whole backing, through the layers of fabric and the plastic, right to the front. Now we're just going to run the needle and thread around all of those layers, the plastic and the fabric, just to hold everything in place. This doesn't need to be neat, big long stitches, just in and out, all around the edge. Okay, so once all of those edges are nice and secure, held in place, it's time to add some couching thread on each one of these little lines. So you're going to go back to the back. You might still have enough thread on your needle. Just going to poke around, basically. It might take a few goes. Poke around until you bring the needle up at the end of one of those lines. Doesn't matter if it stabs around a couple of times. You can have a very perforated edge, pull it through, and then bring the needle back down at the other end of that little line. And again, take the needle up at one end of the next line and down. And you're just going to keep covering all of those little drawn lines with that couching thread. Now to change your thread, all you need to do if it's running low is just fasten it off again at the back, just the same way you joined it. Cut yourself a new length of couching thread and join it in right where you left off, securing it just the same way as you always have. Now you can keep on stitching where you left off, all the way around the piece. And when you're finished, just secure the thread wherever you land and cut your thread. So now you've covered all of those little lines, it's time to add our lace thread. Now I want to encourage you to use whatever threads you have on hand, but for this piece I'm going to use a DMC Sibelius size 30. So cut yourself quite a long length, and I'm going to thread it onto the lace needle, so the bigger of the two needles. Now we're going to use those little stitches kind of like a tunnel. We're going to put the needle underneath each one of them and pull the thread through. Just catching the needle under each one, going around the whole form. Making sure that you're pulling nice and smooth, no knots, no tangles in that thread. All the way around the triangle. And when you reach the end, it's time to go around again. More just catching the needle under each one of those stitches. Until you're back to where you started. And now that you're done, it's time to work some buttonhole stitch. Now we're going to be working along this top line, any of the sides of your triangle, and we're going to be working from left to right. So take the thread and create a loop. Now you want that loop to dangle from the left to the right. The loop will always go in the direction that you're working. Now the needle's going to come underneath the coordinate threads and pull into that loop that you just made. Gently pull the thread directly towards you until the stitch just gently hugs the coordinate. And now you're going to do it again. So dangling down from the left to the right and needle pulling into that loop. Now don't leave too much of a gap in between your stitches. Just keep repeating that process. Create the loop and bring the needle into it, and gently pulling that thread. When you come to one of your couching stitches, basically you just need to pretend it's not there. Just keep on going however it works, whether you put the needle underneath it or go to the other side, whatever makes your stitches the most even. All the way to the end. Okay, and now once you've got your row all finished, you're going to bring the needle underneath the coordinate on the right hand side. And we're going to stretch your thread all the way across to the other side. So pass the needle underneath the coordinate on the left hand side. And we're ready for row 2. So just the same as you did before, bring the loop down from the left to the right, and you're going to bring the needle in between the stitches of the previous row and underneath that cord that you just made, up into your loop. Again, gently pulling your thread right down towards you until you've got a nice even stitch. And you're going to repeat the process. All the way along the row, in between each stitch. And this is how your rows are just going to keep building up. You're going to keep passing that thread back, working in between each stitch of every row. Now, something I want to get you used to thinking in the lace making process is to think about changing your threads before they are too short to stitch with. So I still have plenty left on this particular thread, but I'm going to cut myself a new one now and just lay it in where the cord is going to go. This is a useful thing about a solid buttonhole stitch like this. Now I'm going to create that cord as usual, bringing the needle underneath the coordinate on the right hand and then the left hand side. Bring that new thread up to meet it, and this next row we're going to stitch with 2 of those cords, and that's going to take care of both ends and make sure that there's no tail and no chance of your ends unraveling. It's going to have lots of stitches holding it in place. Okay, so my thread is now too short to stitch with, so we are going to take the needle off and pull your new thread through. It's there and ready to go. We're just going to pull that tail in. Now it's being held by all of those stitches, and you can thread it onto your needle, and you can take care of the other end of your working thread just by pulling it towards the coordinate. Now you're going to bring the needle up through that last little stitch that your old thread just did. Now the new thread will be mimicking exactly what the old thread did. Hold your old thread along the previous stitches, and you're going to just start stitching as usual, holding that tail in with all of your lovely buttonhole stitches. both ends are completely secure, so you can just cut them off with your scissors on both sides. Now once you've done a few rows and you're feeling confident, let's start adding a little bit of detail. So we're going to add a little eyelet right in the center there. We'll do them in a pattern. So first thing you want to do, just mark where your eyelet is going to be. Now we're going to run the cord across, but we need to plan in advance. If the cord goes all the way through, it's going to cover up the gap that you're creating with your eyelet. So the idea is as you go past, you're just going to catch the needle in the stitch corresponding to where your eyelet is going to be, and then bring it underneath the coordinate on the left side. Now you've got a little space prepared for where that gap is going to be. Now you're going to buttonhole all the way up to the stitch directly before that gap. And when you reach that stitch, you're just very simply going to skip over it. Just a nice even stitch straight across, not too big, not too small. And now we're just going to keep buttonholing. So there's your first little eyelet. Now let's make one either side. So mark where you're going to go, bring the needle under the coordinate on the right side, and catch the stitch corresponding to each one of your next two eyelet holes. So directly before and after the previous one. Now my thread's getting a little bit too short here, but it's still long enough to stitch with, so I'm going to plan and start a new thread, just like we did before. So still stitching with the old thread until it runs out. And now switching to the new one. Bringing that needle right up where the old thread left off. Bringing that old thread up to the stitches so that you can incorporate the end and keep it all held in place with your new thread with all of those stitches. And once you've gone about the length of the width of your finger, either side, you can cut off both ends. They're both nice and secure, and we can just keep going. Now we've reached the point where we're going to create our next eyelet and work into the previous one. So first off, you're going to skip and then work 2 stitches into the old eyelet hole. So every time you're working into an old one or a previous row one, you're going to fill it with 2 stitches. So we're skipping that first one and going 1 and 2 into the eyelet from the previous row. Always 2, it will always mathematically work out that way. Now we're going to skip the next one and go along with our buttonhole stitches. Now you've got your 2 eyelets and you can finish that row. Now let's do it again. There's our 2 eyelets. Always just make sure you pull them down in between each row so you can really see them. And let's do one either side of those. So first on the right and then on the left. Now, just like before, we're at the point where the next eyelet is going to be. We're going to skip it and then work 2 buttonhole stitches into the eyelet from the previous row. And then 1 into that middle section. And 2 into the next eyelet from the previous row. And then we're going to skip our stitch, make another eyelet, and continue buttonholing. Now, in between each one of your rows, you just want to check in with your stitches, check that they're sitting nicely and they're all a good size and shape. And now we are going to bring the eyelets back to the inside of the eyelets of your previous row. So bringing that diamond back down to a point. Buttonholing all the way up to the pattern we're creating. Now working 2 buttonholes into the previous eyelet and skipping the one that we're making this row into the next one, 1 more buttonhole stitch. Now skip again and 2 buttonhole stitches into that last eyelet of the previous row and keep going. And we'll finish just with 1 single eyelet right at the tip of that little diamond you've just created. So just the same as the first row in that sequence. 2 buttonholes into that previous eyelet and then skip 2 buttonholes into the other one and back to normal. Now you can just keep playing with those buttonholes, keep playing with those eyelets, work on interesting ways to combine them until you're feeling really confident with your stitches, and then we'll move on to something new. And when you are ready to move on, you can finish the thread just by running it down the coordinate a little ways. That way we'll have a nice, fresh surface ready to add something new in your next lesson. You can just pull that through and cut it off. Okay, that's it for lesson 1. So hopefully by now you are feeling really confident with your tension, with your buttonhole stitches, with the direction that you're working, nice and even, feeling that you can really tell the difference between the sort of wider stitches and the tighter ones. And so I'll sign off now, and then we'll get back into it in lesson 2. Bye.